President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Silver Star Medal to Hospital Corpsman Second Class Richard A. Pustka, United States Navy, for service as set forth in the following citation. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action while serving as a corpsman with Headquarters Company 1st Marine Division in connection with operations against the enemy in the Republic of Vietnam. On 3 February 1968, during Operation Way City, Petty Officer Pustka accompanied the Regimental Command Group to the Military Assistant Command Vietnam compound, where he immediately established an effective triage system to treat Allied and civilian casualties. When the Marines launched a massive assault later that day against a heavily fortified enemy strongpoint and sustained numerous casualties, he completely disregarded his own safety, and he repeatedly exposed himself to hostile fire to move through the fire-swept area and evacuate the wounded. Exhibiting exceptional initiative and courage when emergency medical supplies became depleted on 4 February, he successfully traversed the enemy lines and fortifications to obtain these vital supplies. On 17 February, Petty Officer Pustka was assisting in the transportation of a seriously injured Marine to a landing zone at the Way Stadium when his vehicle was halted by the rubble of the stadium wall. As he climbed over the rubble, he immediately came under heavy enemy automatic weapons fire. Realizing the danger to the casualty aboard the vehicle, Petty Officer Pustka ignored the enemy fire around him as he moved the wounded man to a position of relative safety behind the wall. By his professionalism, dauntless courage, and selfless devotion to duty at great personal risk, Petty Officer Pustka inspired all who observed him and upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and of the United States Naval Service. For the President, B. H. Krulak, Lieutenant General, U.S. Marine Corps, Commanding General, Fleet Marine Force Pacific. I'd like to introduce a good friend of mine. In this citation, his name is Richard. His wife probably calls him Rick at home, but none of us here at Fish know him by that name. We affectionately call him Doc. Doc, it's good to be sitting here with you. How you doing?
No, I'm doing great.
So what goes through your mind as I read that to you? I know you've told the story before. I've heard you tell it.
Well, I'll take a little bit away from Paul Harvey and tell you the rest of the story.
There is more to the story. I do remember that.
A couple of things. One, it's Way is the name of the town.
Way. So
Yeah.
so here I am showing my millennial brain
That's
by
right.
calling
Well,
it Hugh City.
that's an aviator thing. No sunglasses, you mispronounce. Anyway, when it said enemy fire stopped taking a guy to medevac, I had him on the back of a Jeep on a stretcher. I had a corporal driving the Jeep, and we came up to the soccer field, and there was a broken stone wall that we went into the medevac area with. And right as we got into the entrance, enemy NVA opened up with a machine gun on us. I went to the right. That guy, the driver, went to the left behind the wall. Bullets going all over, and the wounded guy's on a Jeep laying on a stretcher. So, being a good corpsman, I yelled over that Marine. I says, "Marine, get your ass up and get that wounded guy off that Jeep to safety." And I heard a "fuck you, Doc," or something to that effect. Okay, so oh, here we go. So I ran through the hail of bullets to get the guy that I was responsible for in the first place. Pulled him down off the Jeep and got him behind the Jeep. And anyway, that's kind of the rest of the story of that under intense fire saved the life of a guy,
What do you think, and what does it sound like when you're running through a hail of bullets? I've never had to do that in my life.
They call it the dogs of war. It's just chaos. And you can tell that they're incoming rounds when they go by you.
Yeah.
The outgoing rounds you don't care about, but it's the incoming ones. And then when they, put holes in the Jeep and splatter the ground, it makes you a little bit nervous.
So, Doc, a Silver Star is not the only award you received. You earned a Purple Heart as well. Can you tell us that story?
That way, during the battle, I was going around trying to pick up one to get him back to our aid station. We had set up a forward aid station with the regimental surgeon, Lieutenant Beck. I found a Marine, a bunch of Marines, but I was tending one of them, had a sucking chest wound, and was taking care of the sucking chest wound. The other Marines was against a wall, and the other Marines had gone on, down the street. I'm there alone with him, and I hear a click, and I look, and there's an NVA with a B-40 on his, like a bazooka on his shoulder.
How far away? Couple
35
meters?
yards.
Yeah.
Real
Close.
Close. So I heard this click. I looked up, and I have to be honest with you. I was more shocked at seeing a guy in an NVA uniform than I was at the B-40 rocket on his shoulder.
Because of just who you'd been fighting up to that point?
No, we've been fighting the guerrillas.
Yeah.
The VC.
Just wearing
Black pajamas.
street clothes and whatnot. Yeah.
Black pajamas.
Yeah.
So I threw myself down over the Marine. He shot the rocket. It hits the wall probably 12, 14 yards away from us. And thankfully,
So from 5 yards away, he missed you.
So I jumped up, and he's reloading another one in there. And I took out my pistol. I always thought I was a pretty good shot with the pistol. In fact, I was a good shot with the pistol. I think I emptied that pistol going towards that guy, and I didn't get him till maybe the next to the last round got him. So I'm standing there, and I'm looking at him, and I look back at the Marine, and I thought I'd piss my pants. My boots were full of piss, I thought. I wasn't pissed. I had shrapnel wounds all across my back and the back of my legs.
From the bazooka.
I didn't have a flak jacket on, and my boots were filling up full of blood.
Oh, geez.
So I got back to the Marine, shouldered him. I had a mule that I was kind of running around with, and I threw him on the mule, and I got back to the aid station. Beck picked little pieces of shrapnel out of me,
Wow.
For a while, but I never left my duty.
For the people that think war is some sort of glorious, glamorous thing, couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, what goes through your head as you're trying to beat somebody to the punch who's trying to kill you 5 yards away from you and try to get them first? It's either you or them.
Yeah.
I mean, something that the human mind is not meant to comprehend or experience.
Yeah,
Pretty
you
amazing.
don't wonder about what the church taught you or
Yeah.
what mom said, or you're in the moment.
Yeah. It's
And you
fight or
just do what
flight.
you have to do. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back to a part of the citation, and this is what sticks out to me, is that at the very end it says, you upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and the United States Naval Service. I've heard you say before, you don't consider yourself a sailor.
Nope.
You don't consider yourself a Marine.
Nope.
You're this rare breed of a combination of the both. Tell the folks about that.
I'm an FMF corpsman.
Yeah.
Fleet Marine Force. The Navy, the Marine Corps is part of the Navy.
Uh-huh.
I like to call it the men's department.
That's right. We just give you a ride, right?
Yeah. And they take medical doctors, corpsmen, dentists, and chaplains from the Naval Service over to the Marine Corps or to the Fleet Marines. They send you to what I call Marine Brainwashing School, FMF Corpsman School, and we throw grenades and shoot rifles and play with compasses and do all the things that you see John Wayne do in the movies. But
Do you get good at it?
I don't know how good you get at it in 2 months.
Yeah.
Like the training was like 2 months. But yeah, we and then we have advanced medical too. We learn to put in chest tubes and cricothyroidectomies and start a decent IV. And those days are the old days. Today they have substernal punctures. You don't have to worry about trying to find a vein to start an IV. They just plow it right into your sternum. They have blood clotting, things that stop blood clots. They still use tourniquets.
Yeah.
But medicine's come a long way. But even then, back in the 60s, if you were wounded, you had a really good chance of getting really decent medical care quickly, and that's because of the helicopter, the advanced surgical units.
Yeah. Yeah. Backing up a little bit before you joined, tell us a little bit about growing up and what made you decide to go into the Navy and eventually the FMF there.
I was an Air Force brat.
Mm-hmm.
Dad was a retired E9 after 34 years, I think he served. I was going to college at Boise State Teachers College, and
You grew up in Japan.
yeah, I grew up in Japan. We were there 9.5 years in Japan, and they were pretty formidable years. I went through puberty in Japan, which was great because of the Ofruto. And I've got to tell you about the Ofruto, folks. The Ofruto is a Japanese bath, and you could take a bath with your girlfriend and her mom naked, 1, 2, 3 times a week.
We knew this was a liability, bringing Doc on the show.
And the food is great. You take a little bit of seaweed and press some rice on it and throw some dried sardines on it and roll it up and cut it off like cookies, and that was my lunch, when I went to school. We went on base to school, and the teachers that we had were great.
Yeah.
Military. They had the best of the best for the dependents. It was, all in all, it was a good upbringing.
Was it a culture shock when you came back home? What year was that you returned home?
I came back as I started my sophomore year in Salina, Kansas.
Yeah.
So I came back then.
I say that because I get home. So take us a little bit further. So you come back home as a sophomore. Years later, here you are. You're looking at enlisting in the Navy. What was the decision behind that?
It's just my turn.
Yeah.
Vietnam's in the news every night.
What are you thinking as you're watching all this on the news? You're just thinking, I've got to do something. I'm a patriot. I need to participate somehow.
I was raised watching John Wayne, the movie Fighting at Iwo Jima, the Mickey Mouse Club, and that Funicello, watching her go through puberty too. But it was just I was enough. I had a library card. I had 2 parents. I went to public school, and my dad and I grew up in the military as a dependent. So there wasn't any question. I enlisted.
Yeah. When did you meet Mary Ann?
High school.
High school.
Yeah, she has a different story.
Never looked back.
Yeah, never looked back.
So what I like to do in this show here is talk about and make this human, because we can sit here and talk about timelines and when somebody did a certain thing or went a certain place, but there's a very human element to all of this. And how did it strike Mary Ann when, after you finish boot camp and you go play Marine for a while, and you learn how to be throw grenades, as you put it, and shoot rifles, and now it's your time to go. Tell me about that.
She was not happy. She really hadn't been introduced to the military whatsoever, growing up. In fact, when I was in Corps School at Balboa Naval Hospital in San Diego, she somehow dropped a bottle, had a bad laceration on her foot. I'm a student in Corps School, and they rushed her to the emergency room at the base. And I'm there sitting there talking to her. I'm waiting for the doctor that's going to come in and sew her up. Well, the admiral, who happened to be a plastic surgeon, commander of U.S. San Diego Naval, base, heard one of the corpsman's wives was hurt, so he came himself. And he's standing behind me, and I didn't know it. And I'm holding Mary Ann's hand, and she's looking at me, and she goes, "Can I get a real doctor instead of a Navy doctor?" Then I saw the admiral behind me, and my life flashed in front of me, but everything turned out okay. But she was not happy. We were in San Diego at the time, living in a studio apartment. Our big social outing was going down to the local drugstore and looking at the new greeting cards they put on the rack that just swirled around. Or if I wore my uniform, we could get into the San Diego, zoo for free, which was an experience. I don't know if you've ever been to San Diego.
I have, yeah. Very nice.
It's great. My favorite was watching the tortoises get together. I mean, it would take probably an hour for Tom the tortoise to climb up on Alice Torres, and she would take one step and he's off, and off we all go again. I mean, it was slow motion, social outdoors for us.
Yeah. How long after you left was that that Battle of Way City in February?
I got in Vietnam in June.
68.
Da Nang. Our mission there was just walking around the jungle waiting for them to ambush us so we could find them. Intelligence was non-intelligent. That was in June of 1968. Way happened 30th of January, 1968. So I'd been there 6 months probably.
Yeah.
When Way started.
Sailors and soldiers and Marines and airmen, they have all this technology these days to communicate home, and satellite phones or even social media, email. None of that existed in 1968. When all this is happening, how much does Marianne know about what's going on with you? Nothing, right?
Nothing.
And you wanted it that way.
Twice I got to a Mars telephone station in Da Nang. And we would transatlantic phone call to a Mars ham operator, and he would forward, on to the number you gave him in my case, Kansas. So it was like, how you doing, honey, over? And then,
Never say over and out.
Yeah, it was it. And we didn't have TV either, What we had was Time magazine, Newsweek magazine, newspapers from home. And, of course, they were late,
Sure.
One story I remember, Kennedy, before he was running for president, dead. He came over, and I was part of his bodyguard detail. He didn't go anywhere that we didn't go, okay? And when he left and came back to the States, he came back to Kansas. He was at KU, and that's, where he got shot. But in his speech, he was talking about napalm babies he saw, and other things that were total fabrications.
Yeah.
So right then, I think, is when it started with me that,
Little disillusionment with
Will Rogers was right,
Yeah.
They need to, politicians are like diapers. They just need to be changed more often than the babies.
Well, you're touching on something that we're going to cover here in a bit, and I think it's very relevant today just with recent events, and we'll come back to that. There's another story you told me a couple years ago. You and I are hanging out at the Military Appreciation Day event that Fish hosted here in Kansas City. And we're sitting there, and you just start telling me another story about your time in Vietnam. I know you've shared it before publicly, but the story where you're getting ready to go to R&R and you're on a helicopter ride, and you get shot at, and it goes down. Tell us about that.
More than shot at.
Yeah.
I hitched a ride on a Huey to go from Quezon to Da Nang, get you a ride to Hawaii to meet Marianne. Unbeknownst to me, it was the first time she'd ever really flown. She was sitting next to Bing Crosby's brother, Bob, who was kind enough to go up and down the aisles collecting vomit bags for her because she was having a heck of a time. But in that Huey, we were shot down and crashed into a river. And the side gunner falls out of that aircraft. I don't know why he unbuckled, and is yelling, he can't swim. I noticed right away that we weren't sinking, so I kind of
landed in a swamp or something, or
It was
just
a
shallow
river,
water.
Shallow water.
Yeah.
And so I checked the pilot. He was gone. And I checked the co-pilot. He was breathing at the time. And when I moved him back on his chair to see what was going on, he exsanguinated from a horrible neck wound. Came back and grabbed a SAR radio, happened to be on his belt or flight suit, and turned that on, went back, suggested to that Marine that he stand up, which he did, and quit yelling that he can't swim. And it probably seemed like a long time, but it probably was less than 10 minutes, and a Jolly Green Giant came and, hooked us out of there.
Yeah.
I got to Da Nang. I got a hot shower. Oh, hot shower. You have no
That's what I
idea.
remember you telling me.
Hot showers are great. I was in there and I was just laying under the hot water. Okay. And some guy
Give you a
come
shot
out
of
of the
whiskey too,
shower.
maybe?
No, I didn't have any. Yeah. Some guy come up and says, "What is on you?" And I, of course, on my back, I had like 3 river leeches. They're about 2.5 inches long, stuck on my back.
Yeah.
Of course, I couldn't see them or feel them.
Sure.
So anyway, here we go. We get a cigarette, burn them off, find a septic pencil, try to stop the bleeding. And as I'm sitting there and he's, working, getting these bugs off, I look down and my groin is moving and I'm not. And there's lice. So I got back in the shower and I shaved every hair on my body. So that's how I showed up in Hawaii.
I was going to say, better get that taken care of before you meet Marianne in port there. That's kind of a segue. So how many hours later after all that are you sitting in Hawaii now and you see Marianne for the first time? I assume this is the first time you'd seen her since you had left for Vietnam?
I think, what's the flight to Hawaii from 8-hour flight?
Probably 8 or 10 hours, I would guess.
8
Yeah.
to 10 hours later, I'm in Hawaii.
Yeah. It's surreal. I got
Clean shaven.
clean shaven,
And
no lice,
there's
no leeches.
hotels and a real airport, and everybody has round eyes. And the gal's coming up putting flowers around your neck. It was kind of rude. First night we go to Don Ho's restaurant. Of course, we're in a nice table. He's doing his show, and he started coughing. So I reached up and handed him my drink, and he took it and took a sip, said thank you, and then started talking to Marianne and I. You must be, you're obviously military. Are you here on R&R from Vietnam? Blah 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 blah. And we ended up having dinner at private dinner at his place.
Wow.
The next night, which was kind of cool.
Yeah. And then you guys went golfing, and this is one of my favorite parts of the story you've told me before. Tell me about this one.
I didn't realize it, but the Hawaiian Open was about 2 days in front of me going out to ask to play golf. Marianne didn't play golf, but she's going to putt with me on the greens. So we're going to play 9 holes real quick. The guy said, "We'll make it quick because you're the last one on the course. We're closing the course." So I got on there, and I thought it was the last ones. And we played maybe 2 or 3 holes, and there's these 2 guys behind us hitting into us every time. Like I'm on my 3rd shot, and some old guy's hitting his first shot into him. And it happened to be Arnold Palmer, and he was playing with the Course Pro behind us. And I kept trying to wave him through, but they wouldn't go through. So finally we met up, and he said, "Why don't you just join us?" So I got to play 3 holes with Arnold Palmer. And, when he'd take a swing, he'd just about fall down every time.
Yeah.
It was
Thunderclap.
It was really weird.
I feel like Dos Equis like miscast the most interesting man in the world. What was that? What was that old commercial series? The most interesting man.
No.
Because I feel like your stories might qualify you for that.
I don't know about that.
So one of the and this is that same day we're talking about this story, and the reason I bring it up is, so your R&R's up and you're heading back to Vietnam, and I asked you the question, did you talk about any of your experiences with Marianne while you're there? And you said no.
No.
And I asked you if, as that time approached to get back to Vietnam, did you kind of feel like the Sunday scaries, as my kids would say, where, I got 1 day left, I got 12 hours left, now it's time to head back. I asked you if you were sort of dreading that, and your answer, which I'm sure you remember because you're probably feeling it right now, was pretty profound to me. You said, "No, my guys need me."
I was privileged to be accepted by the Marines I served with as a brother in their cadre, and I never took that lightly. I never was a hero. You read that Silver Star when we started. Well, I like to tell people that I thought I was in a line to get hot chow, and they were giving away Silver Stars at the time. But I just did my job, and that was what it was all about. We weren't fighting for apple pie and the flag and Mom.
It's for your buddy.
Your buddy. You know, you're watching. Somebody's watching your six. You're watching theirs. Guy to your left, guy to your right, and when they say there's no atheists in a foxhole, they're
Yeah.
right. And I always recommended a 2-man foxhole too. You know, 1-man foxhole is kind of lonely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, talking about foxholes. brings
Never
me
had to
back-
dig one.
Well, you don't dig them really deep unless if you're a new guy. If you've been there for a while, you have the deepest hole. And usually you dig it big enough for 2. Now, in the Army, they'll have strategic retreats, which means if you're in force and you meet the enemy face on, you may strategically retreat back to retool, rearm, get your plans going. In the Marine Corps, we just went from our retreats were from the front of the foxhole to the back of the foxhole. It was those guys are just awesome.
Yeah.
There's only one color. It was green. There was no black and white nonsense.
Yeah.
And in the I Corps area with the 1st Marines, I can tell you, and the 13 months and a day I was there, there was no drugs either.
Yeah.
I know that's not the case everywhere, but that wasn't.
That's the beauty of the
Oh, yeah.
military. And I've said this. I interview kids for the Naval Academy, the high school kids here in town, and I'll get questions that have to do with demographics and race and whatnot, and I answer it the same way you did, which is, hey, when your life's on the line, there's no black, there's no white, there's no red. There's just, do you do your job well? Can I depend on you? Which I think is the beautiful thing about serving in the military.
All this war talk, I gotta throw out one thing.
Yeah.
Nobody wants peace more than guys that have fought. And this business of war, history repeats itself, unfortunately, is a scourge on the human race.
Well, just like you said, whatever people's intentions were or reasons for going into the military, maybe for some of it was, I want to fight, I want to test myself. But in the end, after you live through it, you realize it is about the guys and gals next to you. That's what it becomes about. It doesn't become about serving at the pleasure of whoever's president at the time. How did that feel when you got back from Vietnam and now you're probably more in tune with what you're hearing on the streets, what you're hearing in the newspapers, on the news? I got to imagine it kind of, I don't know, do you just ignore that noise or does it kind of tear at you? You've been over there.
It
you've seen
tore
the
at
people.
me. To the fact.
You kind of mentioned it with the Kennedy speech.
I had survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
First of all, that compounded me, me personally. And that was, I try to remember the name of every Marine that I lost, that I was responsible for, on my tour. And halfway through my tour, I started forgetting names. It really bothered me. I thought, if you say their name, they're never forgotten, right? So I just kept numbers, and my number was 64. That's how many guys went home in a body bag that I was directly responsible for. So I shut down. For probably 30 years, I went to medical school and became a PA. Practiced in Iowa for 20 years, and I don't think anybody knew I was in the military ever. It wasn't until probably 2018 or 2019 I hooked into fish.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, what's this fish thing? Well, it's an amazing group.
Yeah.
Of military and non-military guys that are just out to give a hand up.
You said something when you were telling me some of these stories, and everybody in the military, I would imagine, kind of compares their service to others as well. I know I have buddies that I flew with, and some of them did more deployments than I did, or maybe had rougher deployments, were out at sea longer. And you kind of fall into this trap sometimes of being someone that says, oh, I had it lucky compared to this guy, or, this guy had a rougher time than I did. And I made a comment like that to you when you told me some of these stories, I remember, and you rightly so kind of brought me back to reality. I won't say it for the people at home, but the words you used, but I said, hey, you know, my stories seem, you know, pale in comparison to these stories you told me. And you looked me right in the eye and you said, don't you ever say that. Your service was honorable. And I think that's a message that everyone who's listening to this that has served should take home with them. You've got me on one of these instances, though. You've experienced something I haven't in a fighter jet, which is ejecting out of one. Tell me about that story.
I'll take after Vietnam, I was a search and rescue corpsman and for Lemoore Naval Air Station.
Yep, which I spent 9 years of my career at. Beautiful, sunny.
I was the VA 127. They were A4 training. Flew out, landed, had night landings in a SPAD at least a dozen times, which I hated, by the way. I couldn't figure out how you can land. You know, and we were like, with that SPAD, we were like 140 miles an hour, so we were kind of slow. I think in the jets, what did you land at? 150, 160?
Like 135 was the approach speed, roughly, in a Hornet or a Super Hornet.
Well.
Wait, you actually landed on a ship?
Oh, more than once.
I didn't know that. I didn't know you were a tail hooker. You never told me this part. Okay. We'll have to get you out to the conference some year in Reno.
I would fly out with the squadron when they were doing night qualifications.
Okay. So anyway, you're a true masochist.
Yeah, it's true.
That never, to this day, that never got comfortable to me. Never once enjoyed that.
You look down there and you see this tiny little boat bobbing, and it's a crash landing.
Yeah.
You know, people don't realize that. I mean, you know more than I.
Yeah.
And I'm in a SPAD, which is a prop, you know.
Yeah.
With the hood for instrument, you know, training stuff.
Yeah.
And that was bad enough. It was just a crash down on there.
There's not a single night I ever landed on a ship and my knees weren't knocking as I climbed off the side of that thing.
Heard an interesting fact. In 1968, how many night qualified fighter pilots were there in the world, do you think?
I think there was a few of them, and they were all in the U.S. Navy.
They were less than 150.
Yeah.
Less than 150.
It's insane. Why do we do this?
So
anyway.
I'm taking off 3-2 left to answer your question. I'm taking off 3-2 left on the back seat of a TA-4. And I'm kind of getting comfortable looking for my peanuts and whatever. You got $80 a month flight time, you know, flight pay. All of a sudden, the canopy goes boom, and the wind hits me in the face, and something kicked me in the ass. The pilot had ejected me. What had happened, we'd just taken off from 3-2 left and 3-2 right, I don't know which one it was, and he had a flame out. You know, worst time in the world.
Sure.
Right after
takeoff roll. Yep.
So he didn't say goodbye, Doc. He didn't say eject like I read in the book.
Sure.
It was just boom, and I was kind of in a weird position.
Yeah, you were reaching down, grabbing peanuts.
So I didn't know at the time I had L1, 2, 3 fractures.
Oh man.
From the Martin Baker seat.
Yep.
Which people don't realize it's a 0-0 seat. Mm-hmm. You can be standing still on the ground and eject safely from an airplane with that Martin Baker. I think it's
by safely you mean survive.
Survive. Yeah. So anyway, I'm like this, holding my parachute. I'm watching this jet. All of a sudden, there's this kind of explosion, and the whole back of the airplane is on fire. And he's going like this to land again. You know, so he cut hard back and landed hard. The nose wheel collapsed. I had the best seat in the house, of course.
Yeah, you're sitting on the ground at this point, right?
Not quite.
Not quite. You're still in the air. Okay.
Still in the air. And nose gear collapsed. Rear of the airplane's engulfed in flames. And I see him pop up like a Keystone Cop, run down the nose of the A4, and run faster than the plane that's going down the runway. Yeah, it was really funny. Well, I thought it was funny, you know, at the time.
What'd you say to him when you finally linked back up with him?
I'm like, let's tell
come on, man, give me a heads up next time. Typical pilots. This was your chance to make fun of pilots, so.
No.
So was that your last tour? Was that pretty much your last tour before leaving the Navy? Okay.
Yep, I got out there.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's being a SAR corpsman at Lemoore was not good. You know, we call them crispy critters.
I was about to say, if you're on a mission, it's probably not a good result.
It's not a good result. And I remember one time we had two guys go down, at elevation, we were using a UH-34, and
Couldn't get up there.
Couldn't even get up there.
Yeah.
Called China Lake. They got I don't know what they said, Green Giant probably. And we met them. I got aboard there, and I literally did a rope down to those pilots, on a deep drift, snow on a mountain, and spent the night with them.
Yeah.
Which was probably one of the least fun things I've ever done since, Cub Scouts.
After you got out of the Navy, you and Marianne started a family, and I know your first kid was a bit of a surprise. Or no, your second kid. It was your second kid that was a surprise, right?
Yeah.
Sarah.
Yeah. We adopted Angie.
Yeah.
And then one night, because the lights were on and I could see what I was doing, Marianne got pregnant with Angie. Yeah, we have the 2 daughters.
Yeah. And so you're starting a family. Vietnam's getting further in the rearview mirror, your time in the service. When did you start telling some of these stories? I would imagine maybe for the first couple of years. You'd already said you were now in medical practice, and most people didn't even know you had been in the military.
How about the first 30 years now?
30 years.
It wasn't until I'd really moved, just before moving to Kansas City
and getting
6 years ago, and getting affiliated. I had started with the Marine Corps League down in Wichita the year before I moved here, but it was really fish and all that they do, for veterans.
When you got a chance to start sharing your story, what did that do for you personally? What did that do for your family?
Oh, it's cathartic.
Yeah.
I remember when I first told my story at a speakers bureau that Fish has.
Yeah.
Give them a plug on third Thursday of every month at the American Legion on 35th Street in Overland Park. But anyway, my daughter was there. I had friends from Iowa that drove down that had worked with me, years before, that didn't even know I was in the military. And and my youngest daughter couldn't make it up from Texas for whatever reason. But my oldest daughter, Angie, came, and she didn't know half of my story. She'd never even heard it before.
Yeah.
So Fish has been really good for me, and not just me. It's you get up and tell your story, and it's cathartic to a lot of the people that hear the story too and take it to heart.
Yeah.
Because they have a story too.
Sure.
We all do. We all have a story.
We're just coming off the tail end of one of the longest wars we ever participated in Afghanistan, and there's obviously some opinions about how we exited that. I know personally it's been demoralizing for a lot of people, myself included. I think about all the years that we spent on ships, at least as pilots flying overhead, watching firefights. I have lots of friends that served on the ground. I have people that have been injured, that have been killed, and I'm not special in this light. This story could be told thousands of times. And it has the effect sometimes of, the psychological effect of causing people to kind of ask, well, what was all this for? It can cause depression. It can cause, you name your negative emotion. And, I was far removed from it when I watched those C-17s taken off out of Afghanistan, our last remnants, and people falling off the airplane and hanging off, and I just felt absolutely disgusted. And it was just really demoralizing. And my point in mentioning all this is to ask you, what would your advice be to those people? You had a similar experience in a different generation. The Vietnam veterans returned and were treated, quite frankly, it was a disgrace how you were treated. What would your advice be for those that are dealing with those emotions, that are dealing with their service and having these feelings of, was this in vain? Why did I suffer through all this? Why did I watch my friends who didn't come home? Survivor's guilt. What would your general advice be to them?
Don't be alone.
Yeah.
Reach out. And if you're having, let's get down to the chase, thoughts of suicide, and, it's so bad that you want to end it, get a hold of somebody,
Yeah.
Whether it's someone you served with, whether it's the suicide hotline at the VA or whatever. But just you're not alone.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised. We've had, even with fish. I know with Paul Chapa, we've had times where you get up, you put on your pants, and you get over that guy's house, and it's so dark, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you take the gun away, and
Yeah.
and you sit down and cry with them.
Yeah.
You just don't be alone.
Yeah.
There's we are brothers and sisters.
Yeah. And I know for me personally too, one of the things I've struggled with is leaving the military, going into corporate America, that there's not really the camaraderie, and it's no disrespect to anyone that never served in the military, but they'll never quite understand the camaraderie you have when you're in the military, when you depend on somebody else for your life. And that's the thing I've personally struggled with, has been just a feeling of being a part of a group that felt important, that felt like what we did like truly mattered in the grand scheme of things, and to have that tribe. I had my team from work, was in from all over the country, a lot of military guys on the team, and we went to the Kansas City Royals game the other night, and for the first time in a long time, I sat with 6 dudes from the military, and we sat around, and it just reminded me how hard you can actually laugh. And we all came from different walks of the military. None of us actually served in the same unit together, yet that camaraderie, that bond that was there, existed as we sat there. We didn't even watch the game. We were just cracking jokes and just talking in ways that you can only talk with your fellow service members. And I guess that would be another thing is don't be alone, and get connected. Yeah. Fish has been great for that. It feels, in a lot of ways for me, the term I use is a ready room. That was what we called it in aviation, the ready room. Most guys I know that are my time frame, if you ask them, do you miss it? The answer to the flying question is no, I don't miss it. I did what I came to do and had plenty of good experiences. But the thing that they do miss, and it never goes away, is the ready room. And take that term to mean whatever for our listeners out there that have served to mean. But get connected with someone, whether it's, here in Kansas City. If you're here in this area, we'd love to have you at a fish meeting and come see what we're all about. But if you're not, there's things like this that are all over the country. There's ways to get connected with a tribe again.
Couple of thoughts just to end it here.
Yeah.
I look at fish as a boat, and I ask people to get in the boat, grab a paddle, and let's go fishing. And when I say go fishing, we look for those veterans that need a hand up. A lot of times, a lot of the veteran organizations that you see on TV, especially, are post 9/11.
Yeah.
And God bless them, they're doing good work. What was the war? 17 years, in the sandbox. But they're all post 9/11. And, you look around, what does the pre 9/11, the Vietnam guy, the Korean guy, and by the way, Korean guys have disappeared. Mm-hmm. They came home, integrated themselves, and you just don't see them.
Yeah.
But all the even WW2 guys, we still have a couple around. There's no help for them on these veteran support groups that are in vogue today. So that's the one thing about fish. Fish doesn't care what era you served. They didn't care what your MOS was. If you need help, they're there to help you. That's what I really like about fish.
Yeah, and I think there's a certain wisdom that comes with folks that are before the 9/11 era as well. There's a lot for people like me to learn from. I learn something new every time I talk to you. We sit down, grab a cigar. I sit across from you, and I take away something new. And for that, I'm truly appreciative. So, Doc, thanks so much. It's weird sitting here across the table from me. We sit around and we talk and we see each other things.
Especially there's no beer on the table.
Where's the whiskey?
Super fine.
I appreciate you doing this, and I appreciate everything you're doing with fish as well. And I hope that some of the listeners and the viewers today took something away from it, listening to you the same way I do every time.
People say, thank you for serving. Well, I want everybody to know I serve for you. There you go.
Amen, brother. All right. Well, folks, until we see you next time for our next guest, everybody take care, and we'll talk to you next time.
Hi, this is Paul Chapa, founder of FISH, Friends in Service of Heroes. We're a 501c3 that we're all volunteers. No one gets paid here, folks. So every little bit helps. If you want to help us, grab an oar, jump in the boat with us, help us go fishing, help us go find that active duty soldier, that veteran, that military family that will never ask for help. Jump on our website at friendsinserviceofheroes.org and donate there. Or find us on Facebook, help us out. Let's go fishing. Let's go make a difference in someone's life. Thank you.